gotta love that Oaklander, wanna see that Oaklander, Oaklander, Oakland TV. Oaklander, Oaklander, Oakland TV. Piece of heaven, with our new exit on 287, we can be seen on Channel 20, that's our TV. Oaklander, gotta love that Oaklander, wanna see that Oaklander, Oaklander, Oakland TV. Oaklander, Oaklander, Oakland TV. Oaklander, Oaklander, Oakland TV. Oaklander, Oaklander, Oakland TV. Love it. Catch our fall season.
Good evening and welcome to the Oaklander. I'm your host, Al DiGiacomo. Well, it feels great to be back behind the old Oaklander desk here at TCI Studios. And I'd like to start the show by thanking Isabella Schuss for the great job that she did as host of our October show. And I'm sure we'll be seeing more of our newer members in the months to come. With us tonight is Bea O'Rourke. She is with the Center for Food Action, and she's here to tell us about the Adopt a Family for Thanksgiving. And I'm happy that she's here, and I hope that you will enjoy what she has to say and will rise to the occasion as our viewers always do. Bea, thank you for being our guest here tonight.
Thanks, Al.
Can you start off by just telling us a bit on how you got involved with the Center for Food Action?
Sure. About 20 years ago, a fairly famous singer by the name of Harry Chapin came to Fair Lawn to speak about something called World Hunger Year. Harry had this marvelous look at global hunger and was asking people around the country to become part of this. In 1976, President Carter had a presidential commission on hunger, and some of us were working on that, and many stars had come forward to help. Harry had started World Hunger Year and was going around the country inviting people to be participatory in those kinds of things. From that meeting in Fair Lawn grew a group of people in Bergen County who decided that they would like to do something locally. And so the Center for Food and Action was born. And of course now it's called the Center for Food Action, and it's called the Center for Food Action in New Jersey because we have offices in Englewood, Hackensack, Elmwood Park, and in Mahwah, which is the one where I work, and we run another one from Mahwah in Ringwood. But we also have a statewide operation called CFAN, which helps food pantries all across the state work with families also. So I feel like I've been with the center ever since its roots, but only since 1990 have I been involved again, really hands-on. We're located in the Church at the Immaculate Conception in Mahwah, and that's where I went 5 years ago, where I thought I would be retiring, have some time for my grandchildren, and finish writing a book. And I was there about 6 or 7 months when downsizing hit big time, and my few hours have grown into 50 a week. We went from 15 families a month to 100, 117 a month.
How many families will you be serving with this program this year?
The Adopt a Family program probably is going to be 500 families out.
500?
Yeah, and they'll all be from Northwest Bergen County. Some will be from Oakland. We have many families from Oakland this month who have just come for help. We're just not a food pantry. We do advocacy. We do some counseling, limited. Mm-hmm. We do job counseling and resume writing. And we have, through the United Way, the ability to be able to pay someone's rent if they're in trouble, turn on their lights, their electricity, maybe get some propane for them. We've even had some money for homelessness. So we work with the welfare directors in the localities, with all the churches in the areas who also have little food pantries. And when the family needs maybe a little bit more than just a little package of food, but a bigger operation, the folks come to us, and then we try to get the show on the road. These 500 families that will be coming to the Center for Food Action for assistance at our particular site will be families who were referred from social service agencies, legitimate families who really need assistance.
That was my next question on how do families qualify? Does someone just show up in Mahwah or Ringwood?
No. Our families have to make an appointment. We take this seriously. We show our appreciation for the need that they have by setting aside specific time for every family that comes to visit us. It isn't easy to come to a food pantry. Can you imagine how you would feel? So we try to treat each family with dignity. Those families are referred by welfare directors, human services providers, local churches and schools, school nurses, the Bergen County Social Services. And when they come, there is a set time set for someone who is a trained advocate to sit with the family and to go step by step to try to find out how did this happen, and then not to make any judgments about why,
Sure.
but to move on to, okay, let's get the show on the road, let's start the process again, let's take whatever it is in your life, let's work with that, let's be realistic, and let's try to move with that, and through this trail, trip, pilgrimage, whatever it's going to be, we'll be with that family, not as friends, but as advocates, people who will be there if they need someone in court, people who, to talk with the utility companies, to speak with the schools about the issue. The downsizing has hurt badly. And the men who come are men between the ages of 48 and 60.
The middle managers.
Oh, they got slaughtered. And the guys who were making $75,000, $85,000, maybe six figures, they can't find these jobs anymore. So it's talking about simplifying life, perhaps having to sell a house, dealing with teenagers who are really angry at their parents. They were promised the moon and now they're not going to get it. So we have a lot of issues that families who are hungry are facing, besides the fact that, in fact, one father told me 2 years ago, American men have been raised to believe that they are the paycheck they put on the table. And I don't have that paycheck. And so he feels terrible. We have to work with people who are having this kind of pain and to rethink the issues that are really almost killing them. The Adoptive Family Program permits families to not worry about that holiday. We provide a menu to any family who wishes to participate in the program. We tell you how many people are in the family, the ages of the kids, so you might want to do something a little extra. We even say, include a family recipe that's close to your family.
Yeah.
Include all the things you can. So when you're sitting down on Thanksgiving dinner, our families from the center are eating the same thing.
It's a nice human connection
oh, it's
there.
terrific.
Yes, it
It's
sounds
terrific.
marvelous.
Yeah.
So basically, how would someone in our audience who would like to do something wonderful for someone who is in true need, how should they do it? Step by step, B.
We're a phone call away, 934-5085. Say, I'm interested in adopting a family for Thanksgiving. And anybody who's on that phone is going to say, oh, terrific. Give me your name, your address, your phone number, and we'll have it assigned to you in a couple of days. And then we'll send it out, and then families are asked to bring, we ask people to put it into a laundry basket because we can lug it. We've got kids from the high schools come on the weekend before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And that's when our families come. And we have this enormous gym in the church, and all the folks come. These kids help us lug out to the cars. And in some cases, some of the people who are there to help us see neighbors that they didn't expect. And so once in a while, we need to do some advocacy there. Not so much for our families who come now, because once they're with us, they're no longer embarrassed. But to see someone you know, perhaps even a neighbor, it's shocking for many.
What are some of the items that you would like to see donated
on
to
the menu?
Yes.
Well, it's the usual stuff. It's cranberry sauce and stuffing and the gravy. We need milk, of course, and juice. We kick in and say, look, we could use paper products. We're shameless. We want everything. We want breakfast for that day. We want soap, we want detergent, we want a gift certificate for a turkey or a hard frozen turkey. We want fruit. We want whatever a family can do. The baskets are expensive, so you figure that if you're going to be providing this for a family of 6 perhaps, or for 4, maybe you get another family to do it with you. Some schools are doing it, class by class. Scouts, a troop does it if it's too much money, you know, for a family. So we understand that. We'd be willing to split it up. In fact, we say to some folk, if putting a turkey in this is too much, that's fine. We'll find somebody else who can do that. We want people to participate as much as they can. Last year we had Girl Scouts make placemats. A Boy Scout troop made candles to stick into the baskets. Senior citizens did these little doily things that you can put under a hot plate. So anything that people want to do, we would be so grateful for. But we have to have it the weekend before Thanksgiving so we can get it to our families and so that they don't have to worry about the holiday.
And that is Friday, November 22nd.
Right.
And Saturday, November 23rd.
And if that's no good, even Sunday. Sunday is fine too. We have so many families that we will be distributing the baskets probably for 5 days.
That sounds wonderful. I think our Oaklander crew here will have a little meeting after tonight here, and we will be down there.
Thank
We
you.
will
That'd be
do our
wonderful.
fair share for this.
Thanks.
Do you need volunteers to help you out as this progresses? Maybe some of our viewers out there, maybe just getting by on their own, but wish to give some of themselves to a needy cause, and they can call at
The 934-5085 number. We have volunteers Monday through Friday from 10 to 2. We have several Saturdays a month where we work, and special projects. Even work for people who are at home, who can't leave their own home. We always need people to make phone calls for us. We need envelopes done. The center needs receptionists badly. We have many senior citizens, very able, who work on our phones, do our filing. We're even starting some of the seniors on the computer. We have a little worrisome business about that. They're a little frightened, but we're going to do it. So anybody's gifts are welcome.
Does it seem to be slacking off a bit now? We hear things that the economy picking up. Is it stable, or is it? How do you see it? You're on the front lines.
Yeah, what I see at the Northwest Center in Mahwah and in Ringwood is a growing number of working poor, and that is a serious issue for us. We see the downsizing has started to stabilize. We don't know if that's because these folks have gotten out and gotten 3 and 4 jobs. That's a serious issue.
Yeah.
Or whether all these part-time jobs or the temp jobs,
Yeah.
you know, we don't know how solid that's going to be.
Yeah.
A lot of people take those jobs because they think maybe that group will hire them. So we're watching it very closely. And a lot of the elected officials in the communities call us and say, what's really happening, which is interesting.
Well, someone's paying attention.
I hope. Yeah.
Well, it's good. It's good to see that you took something from Harry Chapin. Harry's no longer with us, but at least something that he initiated is going forward.
Alive and well.
You're doing a wonderful job here.
Thank you.
I wish you a happy Thanksgiving for
Thank
you and
you.
your family, and thank you so much for coming down and speaking to our audience here. And hopefully we'll all contribute, and everyone will have a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Thanks again, B.
Thank you.
Saying goodbye to your old car can be like saying goodbye to an old friend. But the parting can become sweet sorrow if that old friend saves lives through the National Kidney Foundation's Kidney Cars program. Donate your old car and the funds will support programs that can save lives. We'll even arrange a pickup, and you might qualify for a tax deduction. Call 800-63-DONATE, the National Kidney Foundation's Kidney Cars program. It puts the good in goodbye.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn. Eye safety is a big issue. Most of our routine household chores and activities, from using power tools to mowing the lawn, are potentially hazardous. So be smart. Wear protective eyewear, because an accident can happen in the blink of an eye. For more information, call Prevent Blindness America at 1-800-331-2020.
Welcome back to the Oaklander. With us now is Madeline Hoffman. Ms. Hoffman is a graduate of Wesleyan University and is a former Vista volunteer who began tutoring children in Newark's Ironbound district over 15 years ago. At that time, many dangerous developments were emerging over trash incineration, as well as the dioxin left by the Diamond Shamrock plant. Madeline and other environmental leaders formed the Grassroots Environmental Organization, or GRIO, to bring public awareness to the issue of toxic waste. May I add that Madeline is also the director of GRIO, and thank you for being our guest tonight.
Thanks for having me here tonight.
Madeline, can you tell our viewers a little bit more about GRIO and what has evolved in the, over the years?
Yes, the Grassroots Environmental Organization began about 1980 or so because people in the Ironbound section of Newark realized that if they were going to deal with local pollution problems, they needed to be involved or in touch with other people around the state in a similar situation, because a lot of the problems they were experiencing were truly statewide as a result of statewide policy or poor policy on the part of the state. So my job within the local group was to reach out to people around the state who faced similar kinds of problems, whether it was a proposed landfill on top of a quarry, or an incinerator to burn garbage in a community, or a landfill that was contaminating the groundwater. And we were able to all sit around a table when we invited Lois Gibbs, a Love Canal activist, to come into New Jersey and speak to the Newark people who were just getting organized to deal with Newark's problems. And we discovered really early on that we had a lot of things in common, even though we lived in different parts of the state and some of the specific problems we faced were different. In many cases, the government was ignoring our concerns, and also in other cases, the industry that was proposing to do something was also ignoring people's concerns. So we set up this organization with a philosophy that we wouldn't solve one community's problem by pushing it on somebody else. So if an incinerator to burn trash was not good enough for a Morris County community, for example, then it certainly wasn't good enough for Newark. And that was the basis of the Grassroots Environmental Organization. We would share resources, share information. People from different parts of the state would go. I know we had a person from Morris County who was a chemist, and he would travel to different parts of New Jersey to share his expertise with groups who were concerned about incineration. And over the years, with that kind of sharing of experiences and knowledge, we were really able to put pressure on the state to change its policies in regard to solid waste, hazardous waste, and so on. And we were able to prevent construction of 14 garbage incinerators throughout the state of New Jersey. Now, we didn't stop them all, unfortunately, and there are groups that are still trying to shut down or phase out those incinerators and establish more effective recycling and composting programs. But I think that we were able to do something that was very important, and that was to make it so that groups wouldn't have to start from scratch. If they were faced with a contamination problem in their drinking water, or they were concerned about a hazardous waste incinerator and they wanted to know what the health effects of some of the emissions would be, or if they wanted to know what laws they could use to try to protect themselves, they didn't have to start all over again. There were other groups that had similar experiences, or sympathetic experts that we had been in touch with over the years. And I think we've kind of become, over the last 15 years, a stopping place for a lot of history of what's gone on in New Jersey, county by county, and also at a state level. Who the players are, how changes were made, who made the changes, and also, we've shown that grassroots organizing and citizens' involvement can actually make a difference. That just because something is proposed for your community, like an incinerator or a landfill, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It will happen if you say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But if you take some action and you get some information and you talk to your neighbors and you organize, you can do something about it.
Well, I understand that you grew up right here in Wyckoff. Do you still have family ties here?
Yes, my parents are here, and they just cooked me a nice dinner before I came over here to talk to you. A lot of the pollution problems that I've been dealing with don't center in Wyckoff, but there are Bergen County-wide issues that we've taken on. At one time, Bergen County was trying to build an incinerator in the city of Richfield, and so I spent time coming into this community. I spent a lot of time in Wyckoff. I still come and visit my parents. They don't think I come often enough, but you know, I'm really excited to be here and saying and talking to people and people's parents. You know, my classmates' parents who might recognize me and remember me from Ramapo High School.
That's great.
So on.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is. What is the largest obstacle environmental advocates face when confronting large corporations or governmental agencies from attaining some of these meaningful goals that we would all like to attain?
Well, first of all, a lot of times people don't know that they have a choice, that what's being proposed for their community isn't the only way to go. That's one. Secondly, although it's probably not as widespread a problem here in Bergen County or in some of the more affluent communities, but it is a problem in some of the more moderate income communities or lower income communities I work in. People don't feel like they can make a difference. They're not taught in school that, you know, if you go out there and say something, you can change things. So it's a little bit of ignorance, a little bit of apathy, a little bit of, well, what I'm going to do isn't going to make a difference. And then once people begin to do something, if they overcome all of that and they get the information they need, and I guess a lot of times it isn't even so much a case of consciously deciding I can make a difference. It's more, hey, this is so dangerous, this is so unacceptable to me, I have to do something. They sort of get pushed into doing it. Once you get to that point, then the problems are more that you have to break through what becomes a kind of sometimes a cushy relationship between public officials and the industries that are trying to do certain things in a community. I mean, with an incinerator, for example, the one that was built in Newark cost, I think, about $460 million. And because there were construction jobs and there were other jobs around the incinerator itself, the politicians who were in favor of it were firmly entrenched because they saw a way of furthering their political careers, and they weren't really challenging the incinerator company in that instance. That's the case over and over again. To try to combat the big money of a company that wants to do something like this, what people need to do is to have the right information and also get enough involvement, enough votes, so that public officials see that their political future depends on doing the right thing.
Well, there seems to be kind of a, what happened with the Ogden Martin incinerator down in Mercer County? That seemed to have really taken on a few lives of its own, more or less. Could you give us a little bit of background on the amount of money and what the end result was?
Well, we still haven't found out the end result in Mercer County. A little bit of the history there is that there was a proposal to build an incinerator just outside of Trenton. And this incinerator proposal was defeated because of a number of economic factors, particularly the one that prohibits communities and states from directing where waste goes. So in order for an incinerator to operate and operate at a profit over a long period of time, it has to be guaranteed a certain amount of garbage. Well, when you can no longer guarantee the garbage because you can't direct the flow, then you really make this incinerator not economical. Well, we thought once that happened and the Mercer County freeholders put the incinerator aside, we thought that that was the end of the story, but it wasn't. People who were committed to this project and had been for a long time didn't want to let it go. And so they came up with a plan. Since the county can't require haulers to bring the trash to the incinerator anymore, what the county executive wanted was for communities to voluntarily say, or to say that we would voluntarily bring our trash to this incinerator. So what you have is a situation where nothing is really in place to support incineration anymore. You have an incinerator in Warren County, Union County, which are both run by Ogden Martin, by the way, the same company that wants to build the one in Mercer County. The track record with those operating incinerators has been poor, both financially and in terms of the amount of pollution going out into the community. And you have a county, you know, because they're beholden to this company, some of the officials anyway, saying, we're going to build this anyway, we want people to voluntarily bring their trash, and we're going to set up a contract with this company where the taxpayers pay 80% of construction and Ogden Martin pays 20%. Taxpayers pay 90% of any additional pollution controls that have to be put on, and Ogden Martin pays 10%. So Ogden Martin has virtually no liability, and the taxpayers have it all.
And after 20 or 30 years, we still have to buy it again
Yes.
from our own. And you said also that basically they're almost a monopoly.
Yes.
We used to have laws kind of trying to keep us away from monopolies to safeguard the public. What has happened with that idea?
Well, I'm not really sure how to relate this back to monopolies and how the laws have changed. But what really seems to have happened is that the government entities are really trying, at least with incineration and this particular proposal, they're really trying to bend over backwards to protect industry and to guarantee that the industry makes a profit. And that doesn't seem to be the role that government should play. And what's happened as well is in that community, because some money was spent on the incinerator, whenever the county officials looked at other alternatives like recycling and waste reduction and composting, what a lot of people want, they artificially raised the cost of it because the debt on the incinerator had to be paid off. So what seems to have happened is just this relationship between government and industry where the community gets left out of the process, the community foots the bill, and the company gets to laugh all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's illegal, but it's something that certainly is immoral and unethical and not something that that a lot of people support.
Well, we used to have watchdogs. We used to have something called the newspapers that would keep us informed over important developments. And there's kind of like some dangerous liaisons that at least I see happening. And do you see a conflict between communication monopolies such as Westinghouse, General Electric, or even Rupert Murdoch, who is now with the Fox Network,
Yes.
Fox News Network, in covering environmental issues? These are very large contributors to the two main political parties. And doesn't that kind of affect on the stories or the spin that they put on a story?
You're right there. It often does. And Westinghouse, in fact, was one of the companies that initially wanted to build the incinerator in Mercer County, and they wanted to build the incinerator in Monmouth County. So there is a real concern when what's supposed to be a public service, or where media is supposed to be educating and informing the public about things.
News, facts.
Facts, right. There's a real concern when the airwaves and the newspapers and magazines are owned by smaller and smaller number of people who have obviously an agenda. And I know people like us on the grassroots level, we have to knock down doors or we have to pound on doors to get media time, to get airtime, and we do it because we have to, because the issues are that important to us. But it would be nice sometime to have our own stations our own control over our own shows, to have an hour to talk about what's important to us.
Like
not having
public
to,
access.
Yes, not trying to fit it into 30 seconds
Yeah.
and sound bites of that length.
Okay, let's take a short break now. We'll have a couple of public service announcements, and because there is no commercialization of public access, and we will return with Madeline Hoffman after these words. Stay with us.
25 years ago, America made a commitment to a healthier environment. And today, our air is cleaner, our drinking water safer, our rivers and streams less polluted. But now, the polluters are back, teamed up with other special interests and a new majority in Congress to weaken our environmental protection laws. Don't let them turn back the clock. Call 1-800-334-2100 to find out how you can help.
In an emergency, doctors will have only moments to make decisions about your care. They'll need information quickly, but you may be unconscious and the risk of complications can increase. Help us help you by wearing the Medical Alert emblem. Call now for free information.
Welcome back to our program. I'd like to concentrate a bit on the effects of the last election cycle. And I understand that you were on the ballot as a vice presidential candidate with Ralph Nader in the Green Party. What were the issues that you concentrated on the Green Party platform?
Well, there were a couple of main issues, and they were primarily the issues that Ralph Nader was promoting. And those two issues were the fact that there seems to be very little difference these days between the Republicans and the Democrats. Ralph Nader called that a two-party duopoly. It's one party with two heads, and that's the corporate head on either side. And then the second issue that we dealt with, that we focused on, was this whole issue of corporate welfare and the fact that corporations have been able to affect the electoral process unduly, he believes, and I believe as well. And then also the fact that the two major parties have pretty much adopted the corporate agenda when it comes to things like the environment, when it comes to welfare. We hear so much talk about welfare programs for mothers with dependent children, but we don't really hear about welfare programs for the large corporations. And I was describing earlier a welfare program for Ogden Martin in terms of what the county is willing to do in order to support the profits of that company. So those were the two key issues, and then that would lead into things like campaign finance reform and also media access for ballot qualified candidates, so that you don't have to have a large amount of money in order to get the media play that's necessary to get your message out.
Well, if the social programs only comprise about 3% of the federal budget, how much is given to in this corporate welfare? What does that add up as far as the taxpayers' money?
That's a lot, depending on which figures you're looking at and what research you're relying on. The number can go anywhere from about $70 billion, which is
That's
70
billion with a B?
billion,
Billion
yes,
with a B.
which is about 1/2 the annual federal deficit, to, I believe, approximately $200 billion. And in many instances, these programs are simply giveaways. Ralph Nader talked a lot about programs where a government would pay money to a company to advertise their products overseas. And then once that product was sold overseas and the company earned money based on that subsidy, then that company was not required to put any of that money back. And is that kind of a situation that he is most concerned about, because taxpayers' money goes to helping private interests and private companies increase their earnings, and then there's no responsibility on the part of that company to put any money back. And on top of that, a lot of the companies that we're talking about are global companies, they're multinational companies, and they're really not, you know, this was an interesting sidelight that he talked about. He wanted, he wrote a letter to corporate heads asking them at stockholder meetings to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And he was very surprised at the kinds of responses he was getting. And he was doing that, I think, just to prove the point, or I mean, he was hoping for a better response, but it proves the point of where allegiances are, and the fact that trade agreements like NAFTA and GATT are in place, which basically say that, you know, if there's a law in the United States that makes it impossible for a country overseas to compete, then that country can appeal to a small tribunal made up of corporate people. And it can be determined that that particular law, health and safety standard, for example, has to be eliminated because it's a barrier to free trade. So you have a situation where, again, you know, we're not looking for the best and most protective standards, but we're looking for standards that, quote unquote, open up the market so that goods can be sold, bought and sold. I mean, that's bringing us back, so bringing us backward. And there's been so much effort by so many people, including Ralph Nader. He was involved in getting the Occupational Safety and Health Administration set up years ago. So much of a focus on increasing product safety, improving working conditions, in the latest era of green packaging and so on, you know, trying to come up with recyclable packaging and the like, promoting recycled materials. So much of an effort in that direction to then open it up and say, well, all we're looking at is whether this puts our products or puts someone else's products at an unfair competitive disadvantage. Well, then you're blowing apart years of work.
It seems that in the 25 years that we really made great strides in making safer cars, keeping things like DDT out of our food. Seems that all that was for naught. And it seems that only the third parties have really shown opposition to whatever, to NAFTA and GATT. Is the American worker safer today? Is our food supply safer today than it was 25 years ago?
Those are really loaded questions, because there are some ways, I think there are some ways in which working conditions have improved, obviously, and some measures that were made to make our food supply safer. But just recently, Bill Clinton signed a law, or a bill, that would change the Delaney Clause. Now, the Delaney Clause has been in effect, I think, since about 1954 or 1950. And it said that we cannot put cancer-causing substances in our food. Zero tolerance for that. Well, he signed an amendment into effect that would allow companies to determine what would be an acceptable level of cancer-causing substances in our food. So here we have something, you know, that was very positive, and we have a Democratic president who's willing to write that off and, again, leave it up to the corporations to decide. We also have done some things like ban lead from gasoline. We have done some things to clean up our environment, but we have also, on the other hand, particularly in the last, say, 5 or 6 years, rolled back some environmental laws, made permits easier to attain, especially here in New Jersey, that's the case, made permits easier to attain. I remember talking about the mercury crisis in New Jersey and the fact that there's a fish advisory issued for the entire state. Any fish caught out of fresh waterways, you're advised not to do it because of levels of mercury. So what did the state do? They proposed a law that would reduce the number of times that an incinerator would test for mercury. And then they said to an incinerator, not only do you have fewer times to test, but we're going to, well, actually, it's not fewer times to test. It's you test, but we're not going to judge you pass or fail each time you test. You can average it all together. And so once a year, we're going to judge whether you're in compliance or not with the mercury standard. All right, so what they've done there is to allow for more mercury to be put into the environment at a time when we really need to be taking steps to reduce the amount of mercury in the environment, because we already have a crisis. We already can't, we're not allowed to eat the fish, or we're advised not to eat the fish because of levels of mercury in them. So it's very distressing
Yes.
that the government in this date and time does not take the problems as seriously as they ought to be. Going back to the federal level again, there was a report released in 1994 by the EPA. You know, not a radical grassroots organization, or not even a grassroots organization, scientists, researchers, and the like. They said that the average person in the United States is at or near saturation point for the amount of dioxin in their bodies that will cause negative health effects. Now, dioxin was a constituent of Agent Orange, which was sprayed in Vietnam. A lot of the Vietnam vets have experienced negative health effects from that. This report went on to say that, yes, dioxin can cause cancer, but at levels 100 times lower than than the amount that causes cancer, dioxin can cause reproductive problems, decreased fertility, immune system deficiencies like a chemical AIDS, all right? And they're saying, the EPA is saying, that the average person is at or near saturation point already. Now, do we have any policies coming out from Washington or at the state level that reflect that we have a crisis? No, and that's what's really disturbing. People need to recognize and acknowledge that there's a crisis, that there's too much mercury in our environment, too much dioxin in our environment, and instead of relaxing laws to make it easier for companies to comply, you know, that's what we need to do, is to pass laws and to take actions that make it harder for them to pollute. You know, when we talked about that averaging before, you know, the DEP's rationale for that was, well, we want all the incinerators to pass the test. Well, if you use that kind of rationale in the classroom, you know, all you would have to do is, you know, is you decide, well, an A is if we have 100 questions and the student gets one question right. You change the standards, and the students all get one question right, they get A's, but what do they know? It's a similar kind of thing, you know. The idea here isn't to get companies to comply.
Lower the scale.
Right. The idea shouldn't be that. It should be, how are we going to protect the environment? How are we going to take steps to ensure that no more mercury comes out into the air, that no more dioxin comes, you know, is emitted into the environment? But that's not the rationale behind a lot of these policies.
Let's shift gears just for a second here, Madeline. Give you a break here a bit. Could you tell us about your experience a bit with Genesis Farm and the kind of work that you do for them, and a bit about biodynamically growing food?
All right.
Tell us a bit.
All right. Well, at Genesis Farm, I work there about once a week. I do administrative work to assist the director, Sister Miriam McGillis. And this farm is set up around biodynamic principles, so there's no pesticides, no chemical fertilizers that are used, that everything, they grow and produce vegetables throughout December and even into January and February. They live close to the land, and they produce what is in keeping with the season and the weather and so on and so forth. And then they have an ecological learning center where they teach what's called the new cosmology, which is a philosophy that is based on the fact that human beings are just another part of nature, not, you know, the human being has dominion over nature, and that we have a lot to learn from nature. And if we understand how nature works, and we understand the history of the planet and ourselves within that history, then we won't do the kinds of things to the earth that we are doing to the earth. They're also against things like irradiation of foods, biogenetic engineering, because they value, the purity of food, the spirit in food. And, to have good, healthy food, you can't be doing unnatural things to the soil. I love to work up there. I love to go up there because it's very peaceful, and they do take on issues, but it's a little bit different than confronting Ogden Martin at a public hearing, or confronting a government official who's beholden to Ogden Martin at a public hearing.
In your bio, you mentioned confrontational politics. What does that mean?
Oh, so just sort of getting at right here, where you have to recognize, where you recognize that there is a power struggle going on.
Always is?
Yes, that you have to understand who the players are, and that you have a big money interest. On the one hand, you have a governing body that may or may not be supportive of that big moneyed interest, and then you represent, the regular guy, the regular person, the ordinary Joe, and you need to get your facts, you need to get your neighbors with you, and you need to be able to present an alternative to what's being said. And so you're not simply just going out there and talking to a friend sitting on the other side of the table. That person might have a suit and a tie, and carry a briefcase, and represents a certain kind of power. And you have to be aware of that, and you have to realize that's what you're up against. And so you're constantly sort of jockeying with that power. You're not kind of saying, oh, well, if I talk to this person as another human being, we can understand each other. You have to understand the power structure, who's pulling that, what's pulling that person's strings, and then you have to be in there.
In our last remaining seconds here, what is your opinion on the way of the third-party movements as they're going to progress in the future years?
I think that they're essential. All of the work that we've done in New Jersey, the grassroots organizing that we've done, we've always said to people, the most important thing is to remain politically independent, so that the issues are the first things that anyone hears. You might get a Republican on your side, you might get a Democrat on your side, but the way politics is played, you can't rely on either Democrat or Republican to be there as the issue continues. Third parties are saying things that the two major parties are not. Third parties are pointing to issues that the two major parties are not. The Greens in New Jersey are very anxious to develop themselves and strengthen themselves after this presidential campaign. And I think that it's really important for people who are not happy with the kinds of policies that are being implemented and suggested to say, I'm not going to throw my vote away for them anymore. I'm going to make a stand and become part of an alternative. I think it's real important.
That sounds wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank Madeline Hoffman, Ralph Nader, and the Green Party's vice presidential candidate in the 96 campaign. And we hope that our viewers will become more aware of the environment, and also the other people who are talking from different viewpoints in our political system. And I want to thank you again, Madeline.
Thank you.
And we will return after these words.
Welcome to Princeton. This is Greg Schuss for the Oaklander, and today we're going to visit the beautiful town of Princeton. Princeton has always played a significant role in the history of New Jersey and the United States. Settled in the late 17th century, it was named Princetown in the honor of Prince William of Orange and Nassau. In 1756, it became the home of the College of New Jersey, now Princeton University, with the entire college housed in Nassau Hall, the largest academic building in the colonies. The Battle of Princeton, fought in a nearby field, in January of 1777 proved to be a decisive victory for General George Washington and his troops. Two of Princeton's leading citizens signed the Declaration of Independence, and during the summer of 1783, the Continental Congress met in Nassau Hall, making Princeton the country's capital for 4 months. Located midway between New York and Philadelphia, the town was an overnight stagecoach stop on the Trenton-New Brunswick line until the mid-19th century. In the 1830s, the building of a nearby canal and railroad encouraged further commerce, real estate development, and general prosperity. A center for learning and culture throughout its history, Princeton has been home to world-renowned scholars, scientists, writers, and statesmen, including 2 United States presidents, Woodrow Wilson and Grover Cleveland. In 1930, the Institute for Advanced Study was founded in Princeton and became the first residential institute for scholars in the country, with Albert Einstein appointed as one of its first professors. The 20th century has seen an influx of research scholars, personnel, and corporations from all over the world. We're here at Morven, the home of Richard Stockton III, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and his wife, Annis Stockton, a published poet. Morven was one of Princeton's social hubs during the 18th century. The original dwelling is believed to be dated from the 1750s, although recent research that little of the structure remains. Much of the present building was constructed in the 1790s with major alterations made in the 1850s by Commodore Robert F. Stockton, a United States Senator and grandson of the original owner. In 1954, the owner's Governor and Mrs. Walter Edge donated Morven to the state, stipulating that it be used either as a governor's mansion or a museum. Governors Minor, Hughes, Cahill, and Byrne all lived in Morven until 1982, when Drumthwacket at 354 Stockton Street became the official governor's mansion. And this is the famous Princeton battlefield on Mercer Street, right here in Princeton, with the famous Mercer Oak. General George Washington led his troops here on January 3rd, 1777, against the British. Well, that's just a quick look at some of the things here in Princeton, and if you're looking for some fun on the weekend, it's just a short drive away to some of New Jersey's history. Until next time, for the Oaklander, I'm your travel host, Greg Schuss, and please forgive the Rutgers hat. I don't know what came over me.
Well, that brings us to a close of another Oaklander show. Where does the time go? I want to thank our guests tonight, B. O'Rourke with the Center for Food Action, and Madeline Hoffman, the director of GRIO, and Ralph Nader's Green Party vice presidential candidate. We hope you'll be watching our show next month as we mark the 25th show for the Oaklander. And we'll have some special guests, and we'll have some special things for you to watch. And our thanks to all of you out there who continue to watch our show, and especially our friends who call us up and to tell us what's on their minds. Maybe we should do a spot with some of the callers or some of the email we seem to be getting over the internet. And, well, maybe we'll have to think about that one. So for the Oaklander, I'm your host, Al DiGiacomo, and we'll see you next time.